Let me ask you something. When you think about the history of science, what's the story you know? It probably goes something like ancient Greeks, then a long, quiet pause, and then, boom, the European Renaissance, right? Well, it's a great story, but it's missing a huge, absolutely brilliant chapter. A chapter that might just change how you see everything.
So what if that incredible leap forward wasn't really a leap out of nowhere? What if it was more like a baton pass in a really, really long relay race? We're going to dig into this idea that for centuries, while Europe was, let's say, intellectually quiet, another part of the world wasn't just keeping the flame of science alive, they were turning it into a bonfire. And then they handed it off.
And look, this isn't some wild new idea. Even the great Western historian of science, George Sarton, saw this clearly. He knew that this incredible scientific legacy was there, and he believed that understanding it was the key. So what exactly was this golden age he was talking about? To answer that, you have to imagine a world connected by ideas. We're talking about a journey of knowledge that stretched from the buzzing, vibrant heart of the Islamic world, cities like Baghdad, all the way to these incredible melting pots in Spain and Italy. This is the story of how that knowledge made its way west.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The contrast is, well, it's night and day. We always hear about the Dark Ages, but that term is really a local one. It only applies to Europe, because at the very same time, the Islamic world was just exploding with discovery. One historian, Claude Verrer, even called the 8th century a great disaster for the West, a time when learning had just stopped.
And if you want to get a sense of the sheer scale of this intellectual boom, just think about this one number: 500,000. 500,000. That's how many books were in just one library, the one in Granada. And there were many like it. These places weren't just dusty collections. They were humming with scholars, light years ahead of anything in Europe at the time.
So you have to wonder, how did all this incredible knowledge find its way into Europe? Well, it traveled over these bridges. In incredible places like Toledo in Spain or Salerno in Sicily, you had Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars all working side by side. They were translating the world's greatest scientific and philosophical works from Arabic, which, by the way, included all those Greek texts that had been preserved, into Latin. This was the spark that lit the fuse for the Renaissance.
But here's the real kicker. This wasn't just about protecting old knowledge like museum pieces. Oh no. Scholars in the Islamic world were fundamentally rewriting the rules of how you even do science. They were creating a new method, a new way of thinking that, honestly, defines our world today.
The scientific method. We all learned it in school, right? It's the absolute foundation of all modern discovery. You observe something, you come up with a theory, and then, and this is the most important part, you test it, you experiment.
Now, the guy who usually gets all the credit for this is Francis Bacon. The only problem? He was about 600 years late to the party. Meet Ibn Haytham, known in the West as Alhazen. This 11th century genius didn't just write down theories about light and vision. He built contraptions, he ran rigorous experiments, and he was adamant that you couldn't claim something was true until you could prove it with your own hands. He was living the scientific method centuries before it was a thing in Europe.
And this new evidence-first approach, it changed everything. But if you want to see the most dramatic, jaw-dropping difference, you have to look at medicine. The gap between what was happening in the two worlds at this time is just staggering.
This is a real first-hand account. An Arab writer named Usama bin Munkids was observing a European doctor during the Crusades. He saw a knight with a leg wound, and the doctor's solution was an axe. The man died on the spot. He goes on to describe the same doctor treating a woman with a head wound by, you guessed it, cracking her skull open with the same axe. She died instantly too. It was brutal.
Now, compare that to this. While one world was using axes, physicians in the Islamic world were developing techniques that sound unbelievably modern. Anesthesia? They had sponges soaked in narcotics. Surgery? The great surgeon Az-Zahrawi invented more than 200 specialized tools, forceps, scalpels, saws, and get this, he was the first to use catgut for internal stitches, because he figured out it would be absorbed by the body. That's a game changer.
And the breakthroughs just kept on coming. Back in the 13th century, a physician named Ibn Nafis figured out the entire system of how blood flows from the heart to the lungs to get oxygen, and then back to the heart to be pumped to the rest of the body. This is a cornerstone of medicine, and it wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for another 300 years. Okay, so this legacy is so much more than just old history. It's not locked away in some dusty old text, it's actually woven into the very fabric of science, so deeply that we use it every single day without even thinking about it. Seriously, the words we use are like a treasure map back to this golden age.
Let's start with a big one, algebra. Ever wonder where that word came from? It comes directly from Al-Jabra, which was part of the title of a revolutionary book by the 9th century mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. He didn't just name it, he created this systematic method of solving for unknowns that we all learn in school. He gave us a brand new language to describe the universe.
Or how about chemistry? Every time you talk about alcohol or alkali, you're speaking Arabic, thanks to pioneers like Javier bin Hayyan. He's the one who turned alchemy into true experimental chemistry, developing fundamental processes like distillation that we still use today. The words themselves are artifacts of his work.
And hey, remember Ibn al-Haytham, our scientific method guy? Well, to do his groundbreaking experiments on light, he used a device he called a ruang gelap, which just means dark room. When his work got translated into Latin, that became camera obscura. We just eventually dropped the obscura, and yeah, that's where the name for your phone's camera comes from. Mind-blowing, right?
And honestly, the list just goes on and on. You have the genius engineer Al-Jazari building these incredible, intricate mechanical devices. Some of the first robots, really. You have scholars like As-Tusi laying down the foundations for trigonometry. The astrolabe was perfected into an amazing GPS of its time. Botanists like Ibn Baitar were creating massive encyclopedias of plants and their medicinal uses. It was just a breathtaking explosion of innovation across every single field you can imagine.
So, why is this so important? Why does digging up this hidden history actually matter today? Because it completely changes our whole story of how progress works. It shows us that this isn't about one culture or one group of people having all the answers. It's a story of a shared human journey.
So let's be clear, the Renaissance wasn't a rebirth from nothing. It was a revival. It was an incredible reawakening that was only possible because it was standing on the shoulders of giants. It was fueled by centuries of dedicated work by scholars who not only saved ancient knowledge, but added to it, improved it, and invented whole new fields. They didn't just carry the torch, they made it burn hotter and brighter than ever before.
So let's just quickly nail down the big takeaways here. First, the Dark Ages weren't a worldwide thing, they were a European thing. Second, the Islamic world didn't just hit copy-paste on old texts, they were pioneers, creating things like algebra and experimental science. Third, so many of the things we think of as modern, our medicine, our math, our scientific method, have incredibly deep roots in this period. And maybe most importantly, the story of science isn't a straight line. It's a messy, beautiful, interconnected, global story.
And you know, recognizing this doesn't take anything away from the incredible achievements of the Renaissance, not at all. It just makes the story richer, more accurate, and a lot more interesting. It shows us that knowledge is always a collaboration, a relay race across centuries. Which leaves you with one final thought. What other huge parts of our shared story are out there, just sitting on the cutting room floor, waiting for us to find them?